It's Wellness Wednesdays, complete with downward facing cat. It is Wellness Wednesdays, and this Wellness Wednesday, it's a question from a viewer. Yay, I like these. Question from a viewer sounds so old school, but what else do you call it? Question from a commenter? It came from Patreon. So I think this one came from Patreon. I have like this master list that I just copy paste things into, and then it's like, did this come from Patreon? Patreon's a good way to ask these questions because it cuts through the noise of the comments, but it is not the only way to ask questions. And Patreon's messaging system is far from foolproof. But anyway, if you want to support videos like this, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeeannaK. If you're not a patron and you ask a question that's super important to you and I don't answer it the first time, it's probably just because I didn't see it or it ran out of time. So please ask again with Wellness Wednesday. The question this week comes from a viewer, and it is it possible to express disappointment in a healthy way? And if so, how? I've been wondering about this concept and thought you might have some insight into it. Like, disappointment is a genuine emotion, at least as far as I can tell. But so often when it's expressed, particularly when a person is what has inspired the emotion rather than a product, for example, it's used to emotionally manipulate. This got me wondering how one could express genuine disappointment such that it is able to be received in a healthy way instead of following the emotionally manipulative tropes/practices. Take care. Okay, so this questioner correctly identified that disappointment is a real thing people feel. It's a real human emotion. It's not a manipulation. Feeling disappointed doesn't mean you're manipulating. It also is true, as the commenter pointed out, that some people do use the "I'm disappointed in you" to manipulate and gaslight. These two things together indicate that the person is already halfway to understanding, or more than halfway. When you say halfway, it's not truly 50%, right? But they're on the road to understanding how to thread this needle. Now, the simple way, the real simple advice is when you're disappointed in a person, say, "I'm disappointed." Don't add the "in you." Now, in fact, that is a more honest way to say it. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed you didn't get here on time and we missed the beginning of the movie, right? I was disappointed that Cyberpunk was a hot mess, right? That's no individual person's fault, right? If a person is late all the time, it could be something they need to work on. It could be that there's trouble at home that they're not telling you about because for a lot of reasons. The issue with "I'm disappointed in you" is that the appropriate place for that is caregivers talking to youngish children and or teenagers. Parental approval is how parents parent. That is what a kid is interested in. So a parent approving of something they do, great. A parent disapproving of something they do, well, that's the deterrent to them doing it, because the goal is to make kids want parental approval, not just be afraid of the parents, right? And to not deny it unfairly, but parents got to parent. Kids are not autonomous. Kids are not adults. It's appropriate for a parent to express disappointment in their child. But that's the problem. When you express disappointment in an adult, you are speaking to them in a way most commonly spoken to children. And there's 3 reasons for that, okay? There's expectation is one pillar. Control is another pillar. And closeness and or familiarity of the relationship is the 3rd pillar. Now, if you don't want to get into this deep dive into the mechanics of disappointment, short version, express your feelings. Don't use them as a weapon against another person. I'm disappointed. This is why. Not I'm disappointed in you. It's the best way to get the best results. The minute you go, I'm disappointed in you, you're going to put a person on their guard and in fight mode before you've even told them what the issue is. You know, that's the easiest way to put it. Short version, long version. Let's get into this expectation thing first. Well, now let's start with the closeness and familiarity thing. Obviously, people you are closer to, there is both more license to be freer with your language. There is also greater expectations on a person that you are extremely close to. Short version, you don't you don't believe that some rando, on the internet gives a shit about your feelings the way someone who claims to love you does, right? Simple. However, vice versa, their expectations of you are much higher as well. So you got to be real careful in weighing your need to feel heard, your need to express yourself, and expressing yourself in a way that's going to erode trust between you and the other person. You want to feel heard. You want to feel validated. The other person wants to feel heard. The other person wants to feel validated. And I'm disappointed in you is an inherently invalidating statement. Keep that in mind. But let's move back to the expectation thing. Expectation is a tricky thing. It shouldn't be, but oh Lord, it is. We love telling stories about human beings who beat the odds and defied expectations, right? Society also tends to really strictly punish certain people who defy expectations, for instance, assigned gender, right? People fight like crazy over stuff like that. Why is this such a big deal? Right? But that's how expectations work, right? People want shorthands so that they know how to behave with a good chance of success. That's what all these social roles are for. Unfortunately, a lot of them are a bunch of hooey. I think the biggest myth, the biggest damaging myth that we tell children is you can be anything you want as long as you work hard. I liked playing basketball growing up. I knew I was never going to play for the WNBA. Just, I have asthma and, I was a C cup by like the 5th or 6th grade. There was no way I was going to run for a living. And that was before all the, the disabilities started. There are certain things kids are not going to be able to do. And I don't think it helps kids to give them that you can be anything you want. I think part of the reason that there is so much depression and anxiety in, the under 40 crowd right now is precisely because y'all were raised with that. You can be anything you want as long as you can put your mind to it. Us Gen Xers, we were told we were like losers that wouldn't amount to anything by adults. And we were sort of known as the slacker generation. But, we avoided having somebody be president. We took over Silicon Valley instead. Who didn't amount to nothing, motherfuckers, right? But see, our expectations were different. We didn't go into something expecting a participation ribbon. So we weren't disappointed when we didn't get it. We didn't go into something expecting to get an active reward for every single thing we did. Therefore, we're not disappointed when we don't get it. This is an extreme case of how expectation and disappointment are linked, and how setting reasonable expectations is the first step to being positively received when you do express disappointment, right? If somebody is visually impaired, do not expect them to read fine print. If you express disappointment, I take my glasses off and you go, I'm so disappointed that you can't read the screen anymore, Leanna. I'm just going to think you're an asshole, right? Like, that's totally unfair to expect me to read the screen without my glasses. Simple, really obvious one, but you can extrapolate this to more nuance. You cannot expect somebody to mind read. You cannot expect someone to know you want something you don't ask for. You can hope they figure it out, but you can't expect it. There's a big difference there. And I do think that sometimes we have to take risks. We have to take a big swing knowing we might fail and go for it anyway. Anybody who has ever done something worthwhile does it knowing it's not a slam dunk. Truth be told, if we knew how hard it was before we went into it, we probably wouldn't have started. Hence, that's life as a creator. But you really need to manage expectations, especially in creative fields, right? You can't expect everything you do to be a success. All you can expect is that you are prepared, you did your job, and there's a reasonable expectation now, thankfully, that you're going to be treated as a worthwhile professional in your job. That was not an expectation in Hollywood for a very long time. Now, I think you can imagine how soul-destroying it is to know you're walking in there knowing half that building thinks you're a worthless piece of meat commodity. I had to walk into the TV station I worked with every time I went in there, knowing half that building thought I was some dumb slut. That's a fun place to work, let me tell you. But I went in with a reasonable expectation, because then when somebody treated me like shit, it wasn't, it didn't knock me off my game. It was, yep, saw that coming. And that's how expectation setting works. Now, you don't want to write people off and deny yourself opportunities. I didn't walk around going, yeah, well, fuck you, before they said anything to me, right? It was setting reasonable expectations to manage my own disappointment, to manage my own feelings of hurt. So, the expectations were reasonable. For instance, you can think, I'm a dumb slut all you want, but we got to get this show done. Check the attitude at the door. Trash talk me when I'm not around, not when I'm in earshot. Simple things like that, right? Other people can hear you. I'm not kidding. That happened. Obviously, that was a toxic work environment, right? Fortunately, the world is getting better. People are allowed to say, this is not okay, more. This gets to the second part of what the questioner was talking about, that often this whole disappointment thing is used to manipulate. And that's where we get to this aspect of control. Now, control and expectation are linked. Control, expectation, and familiarity are linked. Close relationships take work. They require a lot of accountability, both to each other and to yourself. I don't know how people manage polyamorous relationships. I don't want the novel. I don't know why so many people with polyamory think you need to know how they make their relationship work. I don't. Having, maintaining a relationship with one person on that level is hard enough. Bless you if you can do it for multiple people. Now, perhaps that's just my expectations for relationships, right? I think that when you choose that sort of designation for someone in your life, they have a reasonable expectation that they come first. No divided loyalties they come first, right? Obviously taking, your own needs as well. But in terms of somebody who is not you, the person you choose to make a commitment to comes first. This is why it's so important that these relationships are not abusive. Obviously, a person you are close to in that way can reasonably be expected to have a much higher expectation for you than someone off the street. That does not mean they control you. And too many people use that "I'm disappointed in you" as a lever of control. Because if you drill down on that disappointment, it's usually, "I'm disappointed you couldn't tell exactly what I was thinking and anticipate my needs every hour of the day." And those are people that feel so out of control that they need tight control over their primary relationships, sometimes even their friendships, sometimes their employees. People who need that much control are out of control. That's not okay. If somebody is treating you like that, if somebody is basically expressing disappointment that you didn't read their mind, that's not on you. Now, if somebody said, "Look, it's really important that you're on time for this. Like, I get that things happen, but, we gotta start on time. Please be on time this time." And you're late, it's fair for that person to be disappointed and or pissed at you, right? You can't walk in going, "What was I supposed to do?" No, you knew it was important to that person, right? That's where accountability comes in. In that case, if somebody slips and doesn't just go, "I'm disappointed that you were late," and doesn't mind their P's and Q's and goes, "I'm really disappointed in you." Well, okay, it's not letter perfect best practices, but you can see where they're coming from, right? Like, let's be fair here. And this is why I'm doing this extended explanation after giving the very simple one. And this is what a lot of these sorts of self-help formats, these self-guided help formats, don't do. They don't get into these nuances. Let's face it, there's no cookie cutter response for everyone in every situation. That's not attempting to control someone. That's setting an expectation in advance that it's very important to you that this person be on time. Now, that's just one example, right? If you know something's important to the person and you don't do it, they shouldn't have to tell you they're disappointed. They basically told you they were going to be. And that's why I think that in those circumstances, somebody saying "I'm disappointed in you" is not as off-putting, because you deserve it, right? Now, if somebody never deserves it, if somebody's not accountable for anything, expressing disappointment isn't going to do very much. They don't give a shit. They don't care about your feelings. And there are some people who lack empathy that way. People like that, there's really no point in even having the conversation, because they're going to be able to hurt you a lot more than you are going to be able to get through to them, because they don't care. They don't care about your feelings. So, going back to that familiarity and closeness thing, you got to have that sort of relationship with someone to talk to them in that way. And those sort of relationship standards have evolved over time. It was at one point considered appropriate for a boss to say to a young employee they were disappointed in them. That has changed. I couldn't get away with that as the supervisor of a Gen Zer right now. They'd probably quit and file a workplace harassment complaint against me. But that's because the relationship between employer and employee has changed, right? Employers used to be much more mentors to somebody. Someone would start at a company and be there for years and years and years and years. The idea of company men, as gendered as that 1950s term was, doesn't exist anymore. And so employer as mentor is less common. Therefore, the grounds to express disappointment directly in someone that way is less appropriate, because in order for someone to talk to you like that, you got to know they have your back, right? You got to know they're saying that to help you get better, not to control you, not to just bend you to their whims. There's a huge difference there. They are aware enough of what your goals are to help you get there, as opposed to them just trying to make you be what they think you should be. Big, big difference, you know? Now, again, if you've got a very close relationship with your boss, right? You hang out a lot, you know they're very established in their field. They've got skin in the game. They've put their own reputation on you being somebody that they're vouching for. You see how that more, if they express disappointment in you, there's more reason for that. And this is where it gets very subjective. And this is the reason I started with the easy answer, because this is, these are the sorts of things that make some neuroatypical people just go, this is too hard. People are too hard. I want video games. Yeah, it is hard. Yeah, it is hard. The rule of thumb for this is it's valid if something stings, both on the giving and receiving end, right? It's totally valid to feel disappointed. Don't question the reaction to the point that you go crazy. There's a big difference between accountability and guilt. But take a few seconds to go, okay, I'm disappointed. Is this actually on this person, right? You show up, the movie's sold out, right? You can get mad at the person because they were 5 minutes late. Or you can recognize, well, maybe you should have paid the extra $3 to reserve tickets online if it was that important that you see the movie, right? You didn't have to wait for the person. You could have gone in and got their ticket too. There were ways you could have solved this to avoid this. It's not totally on the other person. Different story if they won't let either of you in until both of you are there, right? If you miss a flight because the other person has your ticket and that was unavoidable, different story. But again, if someone's that flaky, expressing disappointment in them isn't going to do much. Hence me going back to, it's just safer to not use the I'm disappointed in you. It tends not to be something I say very often, except Loki when he, pees next to the bed right before bed. But at this point, I'm not disappointed in him. I expect it. So I don't say that to the dog anymore because it would be a lie. It was a predictable outcome. Chinese crested dogs are difficult. But enough about me. Hopefully that answers the question. I wanted to get into the complexities of expectation, control, familiarity, stuff like that. Because I know that managing expectations was extremely helpful for me. A big helpful thing when it was my first year of university. I was having a really, really hard time. And the therapist at the time I was seeing, went through all the things I was talking about. And she said, it sounds like you've experienced a lot of disappointments. And it was like validating that it was okay to be disappointed was a big thing for me. Because I grew up being told I was ungrateful a lot. And so being given permission to be disappointed was really important for me. Now, you go through a period where when you finally allow yourself to be disappointed, it all kind of comes out, blah, and you're a little difficult to be around for a while. So moderating that if you can, is good. Maybe not reasonable to expect if it's been packed down for so long. I do think that people who express a lot of disappointment with other people, it says a lot about what's going on in their own head, and they're walking around with a lot of shame and guilt about themselves. People tend to try to balance internal pressure and external pressure. It doesn't tend to work, right? It's just an observation I've had. But over time, I was able to learn to set better, more realistic expectations for people, so those disappointments were lessened, you know. Interestingly, you become less afraid of failure if you manage your disappointment. You know, if you don't want to go into something saying, I'm going to try this, it probably won't work, but I'm going to try that. You're not going to give it your all, you know, if you do that. But if you go into it saying, this is a big swing, it could work, it could not work. So let's make the journey worthwhile. What metric for success can I set on something that isn't, you know, for instance, I make a video game that sells 10 million copies. You can't control that, right? I'm going to make a game that brings people joy. I'm going to start a project and finish it, right? These are things you can reasonably control. And it really helps moderate your disappointment so that disappointing is less overwhelming than you do feel it, when you do feel it. Because this is the other thing about expressing disappointment to people, especially in people. If you do it too often, people tune you out. I don't think this applies to most people watching this video. I suspect that people watching this video were more like me when I was younger, who, if they seemed the least bit upset about something somebody did, you got called a bunch of names, right? It's hard to figure out where the line is when the line's around your neck. It will take time to figure out how healthy relationships work because you did not have an example of that growing up. It's not impossible. It can be done, but it takes time and you're going to make mistakes. The best thing to do, I find, and this sounds so simple, but it also sounds so artificial, and people are hesitant to do it just because it's not done. Talk about things in advance before it's an emotionally charged situation. You know, what's words that I can say where I can express that I'm hurt without making you feel attacked? How do I express disappointment without it sounding like I'm blaming you? There's a difference between holding somebody accountable and blaming them. Big difference. Not the topic of this video. But if you have a discussion with a person when things are neutral, when there is no issue, when a person has no reason to feel attacked, and they give you a how-to guide, and you follow that how-to guide, no embroidering, no, if somebody say, I'm sorry I did that, not I'm sorry you feel that way. If somebody's saying, I will accept, I'm sorry I did that, and you say, I'm sorry you feel I did that, nah, that's manipulative. Come on. Use the words they say you should use. Because what that does is it shows you listened, you paid attention, and you respected that person's wishes. And it is amazing how much that builds trust. So hopefully that gives people who sort of struggle with this stuff a bit of a roadmap. Individual results may vary, but if you find somebody just totally impossible to get along with, sometimes you're just oil and water and it wasn't meant to be. And that's no one's fault. Okay? Okay. If you like this sort of content, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.